Hello, good afternoon everyone. My name is Yulisa, and today we are going to speak about animal testing. Today in society we rarely see images of animals being tested on, in which we have become blinded to the reality of these processes. Each year millions of animals die in their cages and laboratories. All of their suffering is for the comfort and benefits of human beings. However, animal testing isn't necessary for having safe products. There are other alternatives, which will lead me to my 3 points. And one I want to speak about the most obvious, it's harmful to animals. It's harmful to animals by either taking their lives or losing a limb to constant experimentation. 2, animals are not humans and cannot be compared the same. And 3, there are other forms of testing that are more accurate, harmless, and cheap that can be replaced. My first claim, animal testing is harmful to animals. I wanted to speak about this because I do think it's important. And the life of an animal in a laboratory is short and painful, as they must deal with torture daily. The organization, an animal organization named PETA, shows that more than 100 million animals suffer and die in the U.S. every year due to cruel chemical, drug, and food cosmetic testings, and in medical training exercises and curiosity-driven medical experiments at universities. In some experiments, they are either starved or underfed, scalded with boiling water, or infected with germs in order to test diseases, allergies, or even products. An example given by the organization Human Society International, they show that rats are starved until their weight is less than half their normal weight in order to study the effects of anorexia. My second point, leading on, if they are not tortured, they suffer isolation. Due to the lack of natural environment, animals cannot develop properly and will learn to live in stress due to the fact that they are not only deprived from their natural habitats, but from any company. Isolation makes these animals lonely, hostile, and neurotic, causing them both physical and mental damage. Animals will begin to hurt themselves by biting or ripping off their fur due to the long periods of isolation. Once animals are in the lab, there is hardly any hope for them in surviving. In statistics by Humane Society shows that 150 million animals are killed and disposed every year. They will either lose their lives, limbs, hearings, or sight. And they provide an example. They speak about hamsters, how they are cut up and they're cut up from like the back of their neck to take out their brain so they can, during hibernation, so they can test and see the effects from tissues from Alzheimer's. Okay, and this leads to my claim number 2. Animals are not the same as humans. The physical difference are obvious between animals and humans. The issues relies in incapability. Animals have a different metabolism compared to humans, in which different chemicals or substances generate different reactions among the different species. For example, a painkiller for humans is safe to us, but kills cats. And arsenic, which is poisonous to people, does nothing to sheep. Due to these big differences, the results can be misleading. According to the animal testing protocol, 94% of drugs that pass animal tests fail in human clinical trials. The neurologist Elijah Akatar has proven that over 100 stroke of drugs that were affected when tested on animals have failed in humans. And over 85 HIV vaccines failed in humans after working well on non-human primates. Most of these testings are flawed and wasteful, wasting millions of animals' lives. According to the animaltestingprotocol.org, a peer-reviewed study has found a series of flaws in the majority of studies found in the U.S. and UK. The selection of animals, a technique used to reduce selection bias, has failed to randomized, and 86% did not use blinding, another technique used to reduce research bias, and more. Since the majority of animals use testings and are killed during or after the experience, they induce suffering during the studies. And then this leads to my point number 3, which there are other alternative methods that are cheaper and more accurate to testing for products. Animal testing is expensive. The cost of housing, feeding, caring for the animals is high. According to an article by allcreatures.org, they show that the government, more specifically, the National Institute of Health, spends about $12 to $14.5 billion in maintaining and testing animals. One professor at the Oregon Health and Science University receives $9.5 million in grants, and in the last few years to test the effects of obesity and diabetes on monkeys. Researchers would fatten up pregnant monkeys to see if their offspring would develop health issues and anxiety problems. And then testing human cells is much more effective, in which the cells are coming from an actual human being. The researchers are able to obtain more accurate information by having more compatible cells and more compatible information. Provided by needs.org, Epiderm is an vitro test derived from cultured human skin cells, which was found to be more accurate in identifying chemical skin irritants than traditional animal tests. In comparison, Epiderm correctly detected all of the test chemicals that irritate human scales, while tests on rabbits misclassified 10 out of 25 test chemicals, a fully 40% error rate. Finally, cruelty-free products are not only beneficial to safety of animal and humans, but to the environment as well. According to Uma Campbell, a scientist, a bio-friendly magazine, she lists 7 reasons to why cruelty products are better for the environment, proving that cruelty products use less chemicals that are harmful to us, the animals, and the environment, such as dimethyl phthalate, which is in hairspray. So in conclusion, wrapping this up, there's lots of aspects that contribute into animal testing and how they can comply to products. There's other forms and techniques. There's more than just Epiderm. They also do technical, they do mechanical testing. There's different forms of testing, but the point is that it's not necessary in order to have safe products. As well, animal testing is harmful to animals. 2, animals are not the same as humans and cannot be compared. And 3, there are other alternatives produces testing products that are cheaper and more accurate. And that is it for me.
Okay, the propositions identified, I do think that you tread off into some value-based arguments on a regular basis, and that's problematic for an issue of fact. The question of whether or not it's cruel and the animals suffering, that probably has less to do with whether or not this research is necessary or productive, and more to do with what you see as being fair or just in these contexts. And so I think that there are probably some ways that you could limit that and focus more on the issue of whether or not this research is required in order to achieve an objective, or whether it is effective, or like on your third point, whether there are effective alternatives, which are all issues of fact So you do have some factual issues here, but like I said, I think you trail off a couple of times in some areas that are a little problematic. There's a good preview of what the supporting structure is going to be, and you label and signpost those points in the body of the speech, so that's pretty good. I'd be careful about some of the evidence that you're using. Frankly, I have no respect for PETA as an organization whatsoever. They are basically a radical organization that also has a lot of problems with the way they address issues on animal research. They may have motivations that are appropriate, but you want to be careful about using a site like that. And it's basic information, so it shouldn't be. I mean, you can take it from, you can get that same information from a dozen places and not be stepping on something that's just like, do I really want to invite these people into my argument because they're. I love animals, but my goodness, the PETA people, they call me a slave owner because I'm, enslaving my animals. I have 3 dogs, and I'm a horrible human being because I own dogs. Oh, you can bite me, PETA. Sorry. And then, of course, never mind. Let's not go there because they euthanize more animals than most dog pounds do. So there's a problem with that group, and it's not a credibility issue that you need to deal with because there's other evidence that points to these points. The part about the isolation of the animals, like I said, the first point is the one that is most involved with the value argument, and so it's the one I think probably needs to be de-emphasized the most. I think you could talk about how many animals are used, and especially when you get to your third point and you're talking about how productive or unproductive the research is, we'd say that's a lot of animals to be using for this kind of result, and I think that would be perfectly fine. The second point where you're saying animals are not the same as humans and that there are differences in them, there are some obvious differences, but what you need to do is you need to show us that the differences have resulted in invalid conclusions. You do have some data that addresses those points, like the one statistic that you had about the number of drugs that have been tested successfully on animals that have failed in human trials. So that sounds like it's not very useful for human beings, although I do think that there may be some argument about whether or not that has prevented harms to humans in those human trials because they failed in the animal trials first. And then the other thing is, if some of these things have benefits to animals, then there might in fact be a reason that developing those drugs has benefited animals in reverse. So, there's a potential argument there. Like we said, we're back to the amount of money that gets spent. I'm not sure how important that is to the total argument. The question is whether or not what we're spending on is producing any results. If you could say that we are not getting results, that the research has not led to any outcome that is desirable or beneficial. Because, some of the things that you described, I'm going, well, you know what? I don't particularly care that much about hamsters, and if cutting their brains out is going to get us a cure for Alzheimer's, I'm all for that, but because I'd rather have a human being without Alzheimer's than a hamster with an intact brain. Maybe that makes me a bad person, but that's one of those things that I think people would say, well, those are the trade-offs that we make, and we make trade-offs with animals all the time. So this is why this is a problematic issue, because it's a value-based argument on this, and there's some presuppositions here. The last comparison that you had, for instance, I thought it was a little bit odd, because I do think you have a good argument that says that there are alternative research tools, but the comparison that you had with the primates and pregnancy and obesity, that sort of thing, and then comparing it, we could do this at a cellular level, I'm going, that doesn't make any sense. So if animals and humans are not comparable, then why is a cell comparable to a full-grown person or thing, I should say? How do you study obesity in a cell at a cellular level and get the same kinds of results? So I think there are other illustrations that you can use on that particular point. 2 minutes and 20 seconds over, so it's like you got an extra 30% in your speech. We won't give you a big deal about that now, but when we have the debates at the end of the term, there's no going over time, so we're going to shut people down on that. All right, and then there's a lot of reading too, so you probably needed a little bit more rehearsal. All right, thank you.